It was 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday. I remember because the coffee was still steaming, and my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the cup. Mark sat across from me at our oak kitchen table, the one we bought 20 years ago when we moved into that little house in Austin. He looked calm. Too calm. "What do you mean, start over?" I asked, still half asleep. He sighed, leaned back, and said it like he was reading a grocery list. "I've been seeing someone. Her name's Haley. She's 31. We're moving in together." For a second, I thought he was joking. My Mark, the man I worked double shifts for so he could finish law school, the man whose lunches I packed for 23 years, had just said he was leaving me for someone barely older than our daughter. And before I could even breathe, he added, "Also, I used part of your retirement account for a business investment. It didn't work out." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean, part of it?" He didn't look at me. "Around 200,000. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. $200,000. That was everything I'd saved from the clinic. Every penny from the overtime shifts, the canceled vacations, the nights I spent icing my swollen feet after 12-hour days. He stood up, grabbed his keys, and said, "I'm sorry, Linda. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet." And then he walked out. I sat there for hours, watching the sunlight crawl across the table, touching the empty spot where his mug used to be. My phone buzzed, texts from our daughter, from friends, but I couldn't move. All I could hear were his words looping in my head. "You're too old to start over." I don't know how long I sat there before I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. My face looked older than I remembered. Tired, puffy eyes, streaks of gray I hadn't noticed before. For the first time in years, I really looked at myself. And I whispered, "Maybe I am too old." But then something shifted. My hand clenched around the edge of the sink. I remembered the nights I supported him through law school. The years I skipped shopping so he could invest in his dreams. The times I paid our mortgage when his firm had a slow quarter. No, I wasn't too old. I was too kind, too trusting, too loyal to someone who never saw my worth. That night, I went to the drawer where we kept our important papers, birth certificates, bank statements, insurance documents. Half the folders were gone. He had taken them. My stomach twisted, but my brain finally started working again. I wrote down what I still had, what I could access, and what I remembered. Because if I was going to lose everything, I would lose it on my own terms. That was the first night I didn't cry. That was the first night I started to plan. The next morning, the house was too quiet. For 20 years, Mark's voice filled every corner. His phone calls, his TV shows, his complaints about work. Now there was just silence, thick and uncomfortable. I could hear the clock ticking in the kitchen like it was mocking me. I walked around the house barefoot, noticing everything I hadn't seen before. His suits were gone. The framed wedding photo was missing from the hallway. And on the counter, where our bills used to sit, there was an envelope. One line written in his neat, cold handwriting. "I'll handle the taxes. Don't worry." It was the kind of note that wasn't meant to comfort. It was meant to control. I called our bank. They confirmed what I already feared. My retirement savings account had been closed 2 weeks ago. Mark had full access since we'd opened it jointly. The funds were transferred to another account, one I couldn't touch. I remember my voice trembling as I asked, "Can I do anything?" The woman on the line paused. "Ma'am, if your name was on the account, you might be able to report unauthorized use. But if you sign those forms together, you'll need legal counsel." Legal counsel. That meant money. Money I didn't have anymore. I hung up and stared at my phone, scrolling through old photos, our vacations, birthdays, his smile that now looked like a lie. I wasn't ready to tell anyone yet. Not even my daughter, Emily. She was 24, newly married, and happy. I didn't want to ruin that for her. But secrets rot when you keep them too long. By Friday, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. I called my best friend Carol. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey, Lynn. How's my favorite retired nurse doing?" I couldn't answer. My throat locked up. She went quiet, sensing something was wrong. When I finally told her every word, every ugly truth, she didn't gasp or curse. She just said, "We're going to fix this." Her calmness broke me. I cried harder than I ever had before. When I stopped, she said, "First thing tomorrow, you're coming with me to my cousin's law office. She handles divorces and financial recovery. You're not letting that man walk away clean." I didn't sleep that night. I went through every drawer, every file searching for proof, anything that could help. Receipts, old tax returns, copies of bank statements. Around 2 a.m., I found something that made my heart stop, an old email from his assistant. It had an attachment, a wire transfer confirmation. The same amount as my retirement withdrawal. The recipient's name? Haley Whitman. The girl. The investment. That was the moment something inside me clicked. Quiet, sharp, cold. He didn't just take my money. He used it to build a new life for himself and her. I printed that email. I placed it on the kitchen table like a weapon. The next morning, Carol picked me up, and we drove to her cousin's office. Her name was Monica, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer in her early 50s. The kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to make men nervous. She listened to my story without interrupting, then leaned back and said, "Linda, what your husband did wasn't just betrayal. It's potentially financial abuse and marital fraud. You have a strong case if you're ready to fight." I looked at her, feeling that familiar fear rise again, the one that whispered, "You're too old to start over." But then I remembered the mirror, and the silence, and the note that said, "Don't worry." I nodded. "I'm ready." That night, I opened a new checking account under my name. I ordered new debit cards. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to ask anyone for permission. The next morning, I changed the locks. And when I turned that key in the door, it felt like freedom. Quiet, terrifying freedom. The day after I changed the locks, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. 8 missed calls from Mark. 3 voicemails. 1 text. "You can't just change the locks. The house is in both our names." I stared at the screen for a full minute before deleting it. I wasn't ready to hear his voice again. Not yet. Instead, I grabbed my notebook, the same one where I used to plan our grocery lists and Emily's tuition payments, and wrote 3 words at the top of a new page. Get my life back. Under that, I made a list. Lawyer appointment. Follow up with Monica. Gather all financial records. File legal separation. Contact retirement plan administrator. Find part-time work. Stay calm. It wasn't just a to-do list. It was survival. That afternoon, I went to Monica's office again. She had already pulled property records and bank statements using what little info I'd provided. "Linda," she said, "he's funneled a lot more than just your retirement money. There are joint credit cards maxed out in your name." My stomach dropped. "How much?" She pushed the papers toward me. "Roughly $75,000. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He'd been living a double life. While I was cooking dinner and clipping coupons, he was buying her designer handbags on my credit. Monica looked at me carefully. "We can freeze those accounts and file for an emergency financial order. But you'll need proof of fraud. Do you have access to any communication between them?" I shook my head. "No, but maybe I can get it." She leaned forward. "Be smart, not emotional. Collect evidence quietly. Don't confront him yet." That night, I sat at my kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling through years of messages. I didn't find anything new until I remembered our old family laptop in the closet. It was slow, dusty, and ancient, but it still worked. When I logged into his email, I found folders, labeled neatly, taxes, legal, Haley. Inside the Haley folder were photos, flight tickets, and messages that made my hands shake. They'd traveled to Mexico a month before our anniversary. He'd paid for everything with my account. One email from him read, "Linda's retirement hit the account this week. We're finally free, baby." That line broke something in me, but not in the way I expected. I didn't cry this time. I didn't yell. I printed it. Every single page. The next morning, I met Monica again. She scanned the papers and said quietly, "This is enough. He won't see it coming." We filed the case that week. Petition for divorce with financial misconduct and asset recovery. It felt unreal. Me, The woman who spent her life taking care of others was now suing her husband. But as I signed each document, I felt lighter. Later that night, as I drove home, the radio played some old love song we used to dance to. I reached for the knob to change it, then stopped. I listened. Not because it made me sad, but because I realized it didn't hurt anymore. It was just noise. Just a memory. When I got home, there was an envelope taped to the door. Mark's handwriting again. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I can make this easy, Linda. Let's talk. Don't drag lawyers into this. I laughed out loud. Real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in months. Because for once, he was the one scared. I took a photo of the note, sent it to Monica, and tossed it in the trash. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the porch, and watched the sunset. The same sun that used to set on our shared life now felt like it was rising on mine. That night, I opened my laptop and started searching for part-time nursing jobs. I wasn't ready to retire anymore. I was ready to rebuild. It had been 2 weeks since I filed for divorce. 2 weeks of quiet strength, of paperwork, meetings, and long, lonely evenings. Then one morning, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there he was. Mark. Standing on my porch like nothing had happened. Wearing that same gray suit I used to iron for him every Monday. He smiled like he still had the right. Linda, we need to talk. I froze for a moment, then stepped outside and closed the door behind me. You can talk out here, I said. You don't live here anymore. He sighed. You're being dramatic. We've built a life together. You don't have to destroy it because of one mistake. One mistake. I almost laughed. You took my retirement. My savings. My future. He looked annoyed. It was an investment that went wrong. You wouldn't understand. That line, you wouldn't understand, hit me harder than anything else. It was the same tone he used years ago when I'd ask about finances or his business decisions. Like I was some clueless woman who should just smile and trust him. I stepped closer. You mean the investment where you wired money to your girlfriend, right? His face went pale. What are you talking about? I held up my phone, showing him a screenshot of the email I'd printed. The color drained from his cheeks. He looked like a man caught in the middle of his own lie. Linda, please, he stammered, his voice soft now. You're angry. I get it. But let's not turn this into a circus. We can settle this privately. Privately, I said. You mean quietly, so no one finds out what you did. He clenched his jaw. You'll ruin both of us. I took a deep breath. You already did. And for the first time, I turned around and walked back inside, leaving him on the porch. I locked the door, and this time, the silence felt like peace. That afternoon, Monica called. Good news, she said. The judge granted a temporary freeze on all joint assets. He can't touch a dime until the case is settled. I felt something like relief rush through me. Not joy, not victory, just relief. For the first time in months, the ground under me felt solid. Then Monica added, We'll subpoena his financial records next week. But Linda, he's already trying to move fast. His attorney just filed for spousal support. I almost dropped the phone. He wants spousal support? Yes, she said dryly. He's claiming he's financially dependent on you since your retirement funds were shared marital assets. I laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that echoed through the kitchen. He stole my money, and now he wants me to pay him? Monica chuckled softly. That's not going to happen. But it shows he's desperate. Don't react emotionally. Just keep your head clear. That night, I went through my old journals. I found entries from years ago, pages filled with my dreams, my goals, the things I wanted to do after retirement. Travel. Start a small bakery. Volunteer at the women's shelter. I'd written those plans in another lifetime, when I still thought we meant something. Now, reading them again, I realized something. Those dreams didn't die with my marriage. They were just waiting for me to remember them. I took out a fresh notebook and wrote at the top, my new life budget. Underneath, I listed the real things I could control. Sell and use jewelry and furniture. Apply for reinstatement of my nursing license. Find part-time shifts at the local clinic. Save at least $200 a week. No more guilt. The next morning, I drove to the clinic where I'd worked 20 years ago. The building hadn't changed much. The smell of antiseptic and coffee brought back memories of long, hard, fulfilling days. The receptionist, a young woman, smiled. "Can I help you?" I smiled back. "Yes. My name's Linda Parker. I used to work here. I'd like to come back." She blinked. "After all these years?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I'm ready again." When I walked out of that building, I realized something. He took my money, but he didn't take my skills. He didn't take my heart. And he sure as hell didn't take my will to start over. I wasn't just fighting him anymore. I was fighting for me. By the time my first day back at the clinic arrived, I hadn't spoken to Mark in almost a month. It was strange how quickly silence becomes normal, how you stop waiting for texts, stop checking your phone, stop expecting anything. The clinic felt like home the moment I walked in. The sound of beeping monitors, the smell of disinfectant, even the squeak of rubber soles on tile, all of it made me feel alive again. I wasn't Mark's wife here. I was just Linda, the nurse who got things done. I started part-time, but every shift gave me purpose again. Money trickled in slowly, but I was saving every cent. I cooked at home, sold old furniture online, and made a rule: no more emotional spending. Every dollar has a job. Then one Friday afternoon, I got a call from Monica. "Linda," she said, "you should see this." She sent me a link. My stomach dropped when I opened it. It was an article from a local gossip blog. Lawyer caught in love triangle. Client accuses him of financial misconduct. It was Mark. His name. His photo. His firm's name. Apparently, the woman Haley had bragged on social media about their new business venture, using money from a retired partner. Someone connected the dots, and now it was public. My phone buzzed nonstop after that. Friends. Former colleagues. Even Emily. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, voice trembling. I took a deep breath. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm okay. I promise." There was a pause. Then she said softly, "I can't believe he did that to you." "Me neither," I said, "but maybe it's what I needed to see who he really was." The next day, I went to church for the first time in months. Not to pray for revenge, but for clarity. I sat in the back pew and just breathed. There was an older woman sitting next to me. She noticed my tears and whispered, "You look like someone who's been through a war." I smiled faintly. "I have." She nodded. "Then you'll win this one too. The ones who survive the storms always do." Those words stayed with me. That weekend, Mark finally called again, but this time, his voice was different. Shaky. Defensive. "Linda, I didn't want it to get this far. The article, it's not accurate. You need to tell your lawyer to drop this before it destroys everything." I sat quietly listening. Then I said, "Mark, you destroyed everything the day you spent my future on someone else." He groaned. "You think you're the victim here, but you've embarrassed me, Linda. Everyone's talking. Do you realize what this is doing to my reputation?" That was it. That one line. His reputation. Not a word about my money, my pain, or our 25 years together. Just his pride. I took a slow breath and said, "You'll survive. You always said I was too emotional. Maybe now you'll see what happens when I think with my head." He started to say something else, but I hung up. That click felt better than any apology ever could. That night, Monica called again. "Linda, your case is getting stronger. The publicity is forcing his firm to cooperate. They just released his expense reports, and we found multiple transfers linked directly to your joint account." I sat on my couch in silence for a long time after that. Not because I was sad, but because I was finally starting to see what justice looked like. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just steady. Like a tide rising quietly, until it's too late for the ones who tried to outrun it. A few days later, Emily came by. She hugged me tighter than she had in years. "Mom, I'm proud of you. You're not just surviving, you're fighting." I smiled. It's funny. I used to think I needed him to protect me. But I'm finally realizing I was the strong one all along. She looked at me, eyes shining. "You've always been the strong one. You just forgot." That night, I poured myself a small glass of wine and opened the window. The night air was cool soft. My reflection in the glass looked older, but stronger too. I whispered to it, "You're not too old to start over. You're finally ready." And for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The morning after the article broke, Mark showed up again, but this time, not alone. A silver Mercedes pulled into my driveway. He stepped out wearing sunglasses, pretending he wasn't humiliated, and behind him came a woman in heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Haley." I opened the door just enough to speak. "What do you want, Mark?" He forced a smile. "We just need to clear the air. This is all getting out of hand." Haley crossed her arms. "You're ruining his life, lady. You've already taken enough." I looked at her, really looked. She was young, beautiful, confident in the way people are before the world teaches them hard lessons. I almost pitied her. Almost. "Taken enough?" I said quietly. "I worked 30 years for that money. He stole it. Maybe you should ask him where your luxury handbags came from." She blinked, then glanced at him. He looked furious. "Linda, stop this," he hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself." I stepped out onto the porch, close enough for him to see I wasn't afraid anymore. "No, Mark. You embarrassed yourself when you called what you did love." I didn't wait for a reply. I went back inside and locked the door. They stood there for a minute. I could see their reflection in the window, before storming off. And just like that, I knew they were cracking. Later that week, Monica called again. "He's panicking," she said. "His lawyer just offered a settlement." My heart skipped. "How much?" "Half of what he owes, if you drop the misconduct charges." I didn't even hesitate. "No. I want all of it. I didn't come this far to settle for scraps." Monica smiled through the phone. That's the spirit. She wasn't just my lawyer anymore. She'd become my mentor, my cheerleader, my reminder that women like us weren't done yet. A few nights later, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. It was Haley. Her voice was small. "Mrs. Parker." I shouldn't be calling, but I didn't know. "About the money. About any of it." I stayed silent. She continued. "He told me it was his investment. I only found out when your lawyer sent the subpoena. I think he's lying to me too." I exhaled slowly. "Then you're learning faster than I did." There was a pause. Then she said, "If you want, I can send you screenshots. Proof of his messages. Bank transfers." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. The girl he left me for was now offering to help me. "Send them," I said quietly. The next day, Monica called me again, almost laughing. "Linda, this is gold. The screenshots she sent show direct admission that he used your money for personal expenses, not business." I couldn't believe it. The woman he betrayed me with had just handed me the evidence that would destroy him legally. "Do we use it?" I asked. "Oh, we use it," Monica said. "And we win." That week, Mark's tone changed completely. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the lawyer speak. He called, sounding tired, desperate. "Linda, please. You've made your point. I'll transfer the money back. Just stop dragging my name through this." I paused before answering. "You didn't just steal money, Mark. You stole my trust. My future. You don't get to buy silence with a wire transfer." He sighed. "So what do you want?" "Justice," I said. "And closure." And then I hung up. That evening, I sat at my desk and looked at the papers, the court filings, the bank records, the screenshots, the proof of every lie. I realized something powerful. I didn't need revenge anymore. I just needed the truth on record. I'd already won. Not because of money, but because he had to face what he really was, and I didn't have to carry it anymore. Before bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. No makeup. No fear. Just me. The woman he said was too old to start over was standing taller than ever. And quietly I whispered, "You have no idea what old can do." The day of the hearing came faster than I expected. I woke up before sunrise, made black coffee, and sat quietly at the kitchen table. The same table where he'd once told me, "You'll be fine, you always land on your feet." He had no idea how right he'd been. When I walked into the courthouse, my palms were sweating, but my steps were steady. Monica met me at the entrance, her hair perfectly pinned, her file thick with evidence. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. More than he'll ever be. Inside, the courtroom smelled like paper and tension. Mark was already there with his attorney. He looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in spirit. The arrogance that once filled every room he entered was gone. He glanced at me briefly, then looked away. The judge began the session, calm and professional, but my heartbeat drowned out his words. Then came Monica's voice, clear, strong, factual. She presented the withdrawals, the emails, the screenshots from Haley, the proof of his wire transfers. Every sentence hit like a hammer. When it was his lawyer's turn, they tried to twist it. "Your Honor, our client made a poor financial decision, not a criminal act. The funds were marital property." Monica cut in sharply. "With respect, Your Honor, deception voids consent. He diverted his wife's retirement savings under false pretenses and funded a relationship outside the marriage. That's not a poor decision, that's financial betrayal." The judge looked over his glasses at Mark. "Mr. Parker, is that accurate?" Mark stammered. I never meant to hurt her. It was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. The same word he'd used when he forgot anniversaries. When he hid credit card bills. I sat there, listening, calm on the outside but boiling inside. When Monica finished, she placed a single printed email on the desk, the one that said, "Linda's retirement hit the account this week. We're finally free, baby." The courtroom fell silent. I watched him read it again. His own words, now used against him. His face turned pale. The judge sighed. "I've heard enough." It took less than 15 minutes for the ruling to come down. Mark was ordered to repay the full amount of my retirement savings, plus damages and legal costs. The court also froze his accounts for audit and denied his claim for spousal support. When the gavel hit, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally exhaled. He walked past me on his way out, eyes lowered. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. But he didn't. He just whispered, "You really did this to me." I looked at him calmly and said, "No, Mark. You did this to yourself." And I walked out. Outside the courthouse, Monica hugged me. "You did it," she said. No, I smiled. "We did." I treated her to lunch afterward. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and iced tea at a small cafe near the courthouse. It wasn't the food that mattered. It was the feeling sitting there, knowing I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor. A woman who'd taken her life back piece by piece. That night, when I came home, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The same mirror where I once saw tears and fear. Now I saw something else, strength. I took off my jacket, set my keys on the table, and whispered, "Welcome home, Linda." And for the first time since he left, that house actually felt like mine. Later that week, Haley emailed me. No drama, no apology, just a simple line. "Thank you for standing up for yourself." I needed to see it too. I smiled. Maybe she'd learn her lesson the easy way, by watching mine. That night, I sat by the window sipping tea. The city was quiet. Justice didn't roar like thunder. It whispered, steady and soft. "You made it." I didn't just win a case. I won myself back. After the court ruling, life didn't magically become easy. But for the first time in years, it was mine. The checks from the settlement took months to clear, and the process was exhausting. Forms, signatures, bank visits. But every time I wrote my name on a document, I felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that I'd lost long before Mark ever left. I started working full-time at the clinic again. The shifts were long, the patients demanding, but it grounded me. I'd forgotten how good it felt to be useful, to help people, to matter. I began smiling again. Not the polite smile I used to fake at his law firm dinners, but real smiles. The kind that come from a quiet sense of peace. On weekends, I picked up small joys I'd abandoned years ago. Morning walks by the lake. Reading mystery novels. Cooking new recipes just for fun. One afternoon, I even baked cookies and brought them to the nurse's station. One of the younger nurses, Megan, laughed and said, "You're glowing, Linda. What's your secret?" I smiled. Peace of mind. She nodded like she understood, but I knew she didn't, not yet. Maybe one day she would. Still, not everything was easy. There were nights I woke up at 3 a.m. to the memory of that morning. His words, his smirk, the betrayal. But I didn't cry anymore. I'd just breathe, remind myself you're free now, and go back to sleep. Freedom has its own kind of loneliness. But it's the kind that heals you. Then one afternoon, as I was locking up the clinic, I saw a familiar face waiting outside, Emily. She waved. Hey, Mom. I brought you something. She handed me a small gift bag. Inside was a silver keychain that said, Still standing. I blinked hard to keep the tears in. She smiled. Dad tried to call me last week, she said quietly. I didn't answer. I don't owe him anything. You taught me that. That moment hit me harder than any court victory. Because it wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about breaking a cycle. She would never let someone do to her what I'd let happen to me. I hugged her tight. You're stronger than I ever was. She whispered, because you showed me how. That night, I sat on the porch watching the sunset, that same view I'd once shared with him. But now it was just me. And it was enough. The air smelled like fresh rain, and for some reason, I thought about all the doors in my life. How one slammed shut the day he left. How another opened the day I decided I deserved better. And how now, maybe, there was another door waiting for me, one that led to something entirely new. A few days later, Monica called again. Linda, I wanted to tell you. The case inspired one of my paralegals to start a nonprofit for women in financial recovery. Would you consider helping with it? I hesitated. I'm not really a speaker or anything. She laughed. You don't need to be. Just tell your story. The thought terrified me. But it also excited me. Maybe my pain could serve a purpose. 2 weeks later, I stood at a small community center, facing a room full of women. Some scared, some angry, some broken in the exact way I had been. I told them everything. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fear, and the slow, painful climb back to myself. No fancy words. No victimhood. Just truth. When I finished, the room was quiet. Then one woman whispered, If you can do it, maybe I can too. And that's when I realized my revenge had become something much bigger. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about us. That night, driving home, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The lines around my eyes were deeper now. But so was my strength. And for the first time, I said it out loud. I love who I've become. 6 months passed after the court case. The dust settled. The phone stopped buzzing. The whispers faded. And life, real, quiet, beautiful life, began again. I'd gone from a broken woman to a counselor of sorts. The women's group Monica connected me with became my second family. We met every Wednesday evening. 10 women sitting in a circle of folding chairs, sharing stories, crying, laughing, healing. They called me Mama Linda. It made me smile every time. One evening after a meeting, as I was packing up the leftover coffee cups, a man approached me. He looked familiar. Kind eyes, silver hair, a little worn around the edges like life had tested him too. He smiled shyly. You're Linda Parker, right? My sister's in your group, Angela. I nodded. Oh, Angela. She's doing great. He chuckled. Yeah, thanks to you. I just wanted to thank you for helping her. We talked for a few minutes. Nothing deep, just easy conversation. His name was Tom, a retired firefighter who volunteered at the center. Before leaving, he said, If you ever need someone to carry those heavy coffee boxes, I'm around. I smiled politely. Thank you. I might take you up on that. And that was it. Simple. Ordinary. But for some reason, when I drove home, I couldn't stop smiling. The next few weeks were peaceful. I worked, I volunteered, I cooked for myself. Real meals, not just toast and coffee. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive. Even my plants were thriving, which I took as a personal victory. Then one Sunday morning, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hi Linda, it's Tom. Angela said you love blueberry muffins. I'm at the farmer's market. Should I pick some up? I laughed out loud. Blueberry muffins. The simplest, kindest text I'd seen in years. I typed back. Sure. Only if you promise to share one. That afternoon, He showed up at my doorstep with a paper bag full of muffins and 2 coffees. We sat on the porch, talking about everything: his late wife, my job at the clinic, how both of us found peace in second chances. He never asked about Mark, and I didn't bring him up. That silence between us wasn't awkward. It was respectful. He saw me as who I was now, not who I used to be. That night, after he left, I caught myself smiling again. Really smiling. Not because I needed someone, but because I'd finally found peace inside myself. Tom was just extra sunlight. I stood by the window and looked at the reflection of my home. Everything around me had changed. The locks, the furniture, the energy. But the woman inside had changed most of all. A week later, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. It felt surreal, like running into a ghost. He looked tired, older, the expensive suit replaced by a wrinkled shirt. For a second, he froze. Then he forced a smile. "Linda." I nodded politely. "Mark." He looked down, almost embarrassed. "I heard about what you've been doing. The women's group." "That's good." I just nodded again. "It is good." He shifted awkwardly. "You seem happy." "I am," I said simply. He smiled faintly. "You look different." I tilted my head slightly. "I am different." There was a long pause before he said softly, "I guess I was wrong. You weren't too old to start over." I met his eyes for the first time in years and said, "No, Mark. I was just too strong to stay broken." And then I walked away, concert and free. That night, I closed my front door, leaned against it, and took a deep breath. The keys jingled in my hand. A sound that used to mean fear now meant freedom. My phone buzzed, a message from Tom. "Coffee tomorrow?" I smiled. "Yes. That's how healing works. Not all at once. Not with revenge or fire. But with slow mornings, new faces, quiet joy, and the courage to open one more door." It's been a year now. A full year since the day he walked out and said, "You're too old to start over." Funny how a single sentence can both destroy you and rebuild you. When I think back to that morning, the trembling hands, the shattered trust, the silence in that house, it almost feels like another lifetime. Because the woman sitting here now isn't the same one who begged him to stay. She's the one who let him go. I still live in the same house. But it feels like mine now, every inch of it. The living room smells like vanilla candles. The kitchen has a new table, smaller but brighter. The old photos are gone, replaced with new ones. Me and Emily, me and my clinic coworkers, me and the women's group. And yes, even one of me and Tom, laughing over coffee at the farmer's market. Sometimes people ask if I've forgiven Mark. I used to say no, but now, I think I have. Not for his sake, for mine. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about refusing to let it own you anymore. I've spoken at 5 women's recovery events now. Every time I tell them the same thing. You can survive anything once you decide that your dignity isn't negotiable. Some of them cry. Some nod quietly. Every time I finish, at least one woman comes up to me afterward and whispers, "Thank you. I thought I was alone." I always smile and tell her, "You're not. None of us are." Last week, I finally got my retirement account reestablished. It's smaller than before, but it's mine. Every dollar I earn goes into it with pride. And I'll tell you, there's a special kind of peace in rebuilding something from scratch with your own 2 hands. The same hands that once trembled with fear now sign new contracts, hold new keys, bake Sunday muffins, and comfort strangers. These hands didn't just survive. They created a new life. Last night, as the sun was setting, Tom and I were sitting on the porch. He reached over, held my hand, and said softly, "You know, you smile with your eyes now." I laughed. "What does that even mean?" He shrugged. "It means you're free." He was right. I am. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror, the same mirror where I once whispered, "Maybe I am too old." Now I smiled and said out loud, "You were never too old. You were just waiting to remember who you are." I turned off the light, crawled into bed, and for the first time in years, I didn't fall asleep replaying the past. I dreamed about the future. So yes, he blew my retirement money on his new lover. But what he really did was give me the one thing money could never buy: freedom. Because sometimes, the worst thing someone does to you is exactly what sets you free. And if you were me, what would you have done? Comment below.